Alright, bro. We're going to start off on EQs. Alright? Again. So, I got a scale of frequency numbers. At the top, and this is where you might want to get your notes out. So, at the top, we got 20 kilohertz. We got 10 to 15 kilohertz, which is under 20. That's shimmer, air, and brightness. Under 10 to 15 kilohertz, we have 8 to 10 kilohertz. That's hi-hats and cymbals. We have 6 to 7 kilohertz, which is syllabus and the S sound, which is like s, s. That's under 8 to 10 kilohertz. Under the 6 to 7 kilohertz, we have 5 kilohertz, which is presence. Under that, we have 2 to 4 kilohertz, which is vocals and sometimes guitar. Under that, we have 1,000 hertz, aka 1 kilohertz, which is snare. Under that, we have 300 hertz, which is mud, which can be considered cloudiness in the sound. Under that, we have 100 hertz, which is kick. Under that, we have 60 to 80 hertz, which is bass. Under that, we have 40 hertz, which is sub bass. Under that, it has 20 hertz. Now, 20 kilohertz at the top, and then the 20 hertz at the bottom. Those are the caps. The 20 hertz under that can be considered noise and rumble, and that's pretty much like stuff like earthquakes and stuff you don't really hear under the ground, pretty much, so to speak. Hear under the ground, or out towards the far distance. So our first instrument, and you see how I got it organized. I go from the bass, the bottom, on down. This is where the highness is, which is 10 to 15 kilohertz at the top. So we're gonna start with the 808s. What I do, and this is a part, I guess this could be considered a part of EQ, because this is basically balancing the sound out, equalizing the sound. So we're gonna start out with our 808s. Notice I have it in 1. So we go to the mixer board. It's an insert 1. I'm not gonna say always do that, but that's a good way to organize yourself. Start out with the 808s in 1, and then work your way down. And I'll go through that as I move on. So we have our sound 808. Turn it up real quick. That's what it sounds like normally. I haven't done anything to it. That's what it sounds like when I pull it out of this little menu here. So what I do first is I normalize it, and I reverse polarity. Normalizing can bring up the volume. It basically normalizes the sound. Like if the sound comes out of here and it's like all crazy and just has like different sounds coming off of it, you can normalize it, and it just kind of it seems like it compacts it back to normalize, back to 100. Back to 0 dB. It may be louder sometimes, and sometimes it'll bring it down. Reverse polarity, it basically flips the sound, like not reversing it as like that, not reversing it, but reversing polarity flips it on its back. And with this, I'm not too abreast on a definition of reverse polarity, but when I hear it, say if I was to do a snare, and it's real subtle, but it just makes the sound more balanced. It doesn't seem like it's attacking the song. Alright, so So that's why I use reverse polarity. That's why I use it. I'm not saying that's a definition, but that's why I use it. So yeah, these are the first two things I do whenever before I start. Then I go to the mixer board, which is right here. I'm gonna move this down. Bring this up. So 808 is on mixer board. Insert 1. We're going to go to slot 1. We're going to go down to filter Fruity Parametric EQ2. This is going to come up. So, like I said in the beginning, 808, which can be considered bass, is around 60 to 80 hertz. So, when we look at it, first we look up top. This says bass, so it's clearly printed out. It says bass, which is, you know, point blank. 60 to 80 hertz is around this area. Alright? So, let's bring that back up. Minimize it. So we're going to look at the sound in this area, but before we do anything, we're gonna cut, and that's to cut that muddiness, right? And you gotta play around with the sounds in order to tune your ear into cutting and boosting, but this is the video to help you do that. So we're gonna go to 300 hertz, which was mud. Hopefully you wrote it down, or you know, yeah, hopefully you wrote it down, bro. Memorized it, whatever. Let's make this a little bit smaller. Alright, so the mud 300, so we're gonna cut. So when we say cut, bringing it down, we're cutting it out. First is gonna look like this. And what I do is I don't want to add all these frequencies under it, because if I have a boost, you know, this wideness is going to interfere with the boost. So if we don't want that, we go down, and it's an orange 3, so it's going to be the orange one. So we're going to move our bandwidth and tighten it. So that cut is just going to cut this frequency right here. And that's all we need to cut. Bring it down a little bit more. Alright, so now we got the 808, which was boosted at about 60 to 80 hertz. So when we boost, we want to go up, right? Well, we want to boost around 60 to 80. So right now it says 127, and that's right here where the cursor is. So we want to go to about 80. Right? That's 85. 85 is fine. Go down to the bandwidth and just tighten it. Okay? Bring it down a little bit. Okay, but I like to normally do 808s, and that 808, I like to boost around here, around 147. You know, like right under where it says bass, because it just sounds real clear right there, and then like really tighten it. But as far as like learning purposes, you know, 60 to 80. Yeah, right here is fine too. Sub bass, just play around with it. Your ear is your ear, and your sound is your sound. Don't get caught up in don't get caught up in quote unquote doing this because this person does it, or this person says so, or these notes say so. Do it because you feel as though this sounds good. So this is what I like to do. This is when I'm normally making a beat, I like to EQ my 808 like this, like literally like this. But yeah, that's the 808. Also, we go back to, let's see, we go back to the actual 808 properties. We go here and we go to cut itself. So that'll, I know we talked about 808s and how they just drag on, and you know they interfere with everything else. This stops that. You don't even have to play around with these numbers, because if I change this to 16, if I change this to 10, it should automatically go back to 6 and 6, and that's where that's automatic. That'll keep your sound stable, and it should sound pretty good. I'm not using my big speakers right now. I'm using my computer speakers, so I'm not sure what they sound like to you, but I know when I use my big speakers, this is a powerful bass. Moving on. That's 808s covered. Kick. Let's go to kick. Kick is at 100 hertz. So first, we're gonna do like we said, normalize, reverse polarity. You can cut it depending on what the kick does, but the kick is pretty tight, so you don't need to cut it. That's the first steps out of the way. Then we're gonna EQ it. Go to the EQ2. And being as though cut is a pretty simple step for each instrument, you don't really have to do this so many times. It should stay like this, you know. Even if you move it, you know, this way, it's not going to really do too much. It just needs to be cut in this area. It just needs to cut the low mid, and this is fine for each and every instrument. So what we'll do is save a preset. I already have it saved as Styx cut, so we're going to cancel. But once you save it, you go back to presets, and it'll be here, Styx cut. So we're going to go back to default like this. Go back to preset, Styx cut. So now you don't have to manually cut your low mids, the mud. Alright, with the kick is 100 hertz. 100 hertz is about here. Okay. You can probably hear the boost. Let me see, let me reset it. Then we're gonna pull it up. So I'm sure you can probably hear it. Once we bring it up, we're going to close the bandwidth. So now it's not getting all these frequencies. Before I closed the bandwidth, it was also getting in a lot of bass. So let's go back. And you see how the line is? That line, this area means it's in there. So you can probably hear some bass. I'm gonna close it. Now it's just a kick. Now depending on the song, you can either have it like that, or you can boost its bass. And when I meant sub bass. It was including the sub bass. Because the kick is around the bass area anyway. So normally, sometimes what I'll do is I'll normally go ahead and EQ it this way. But depending on your beat, you might want it a little bit punchy. So we might not want to go here. We might want to go up here. And this is where I go. I go to about maybe there and have it a bit punchier. That's up to you. That's EQing kicks. Alright, claps and snares. Claps and snares can be interchangeable because they both do the same thing. They both attack, so to speak. They have this hard slapping noise. So It can be EQ same. So what we're gonna do, once again, we're gonna normalize and reverse polarity for both. And since they're on the same insert, we don't have to worry about doing them separately. So we're gonna go to EQ, go to Styx cut, now that we have it saved. And one snare is at 1,000 hertz. Where's 1,000 hertz? 1,000 hertz. Right here. 1K. That's 1,000. So we're gonna move that, bring it up to about 1,016. Close your bandwidth, because you don't want it sounding like that. You can, depending on the song. I'm not saying you don't want it to sound like that, but this is the process. Once you get the process ingrained, then you can branch out. So to ingrain it, we're going to lower the bandwidth to about that, and that's a pretty clear snare. About there is fine. And also, like, if you really don't want to go by numbers, if you don't want to pull out your notebook all the time, you can go by where the sound is sensitive. So with this snare, the sound is sensitive all around here, but I look to where it's like, towards the mid section, because you don't want to boost the bass of a snare. You don't want to boost the low mid frequency, because that's going to interfere with the cut of the mud. And this area pretty much is the drop off. Now you can boost the drop off. I'm not saying that'll work. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But I like to look at the middle of the sensitive area, and I'll boost it. So we're gonna come out of the snare, and that did the same thing for the clap. Okay. Moving on, we got the hi-hats, which is where is that? 80 to 10 kilohertz. Now that is a jump that did jump past the vocals, the presence, and the sibilance. Because I did group together the drums. You got the 808, you got the kicks, you got the snares and the claps, and you got the hi-hats. That's the drum, instruments. So I like to keep those together. So with the hi-hats, we got 8 to 10 kilohertz. We're gonna go on first verse. It's at insert 4. The closed hats are at insert 4. The open hats are at insert 4. The cymbals are at insert 4. Normalize, reverse polarity. Alright, go to EQ, go to preset, and cut. Now if you play your hi-hats, sometimes they won't sound, they won't move into this area. They'll just be all, in that area. That's not the same for maybe something like a cymbal, which does travel a little bit towards the cut area. Let's see what happens when we normalize it. If you can see it, the waves, they do travel towards that area. So you still want to have it cut, because if it's not cut, it's still going to have that, that low mid that you don't want. So just, even if you are doing hi-hats, just make sure you still cut it. But yeah. So with the hi-hats, we said 8 to 10 kilohertz, which is about here. That's 10 kilohertz. So we're gonna move it over, and there's the number right here. You don't even have to look down here. The number 10 kilohertz. Move it up. Just move it up a little bit. Cut the bandwidth. Alright. That should uh, make those sounds a little bit more clear. And when you boost something, make sure you do play with the volume of it, because boosting could affect your volume of the sound. Sometimes they're interchangeable. So just play around with that. And when you have a good boost, you don't want to change it, because sometimes that can mess up the balance of what you was going for, up the clarity. So if you have a boost like that, but it sounds loud, and it sounds loud like maybe like that or something, bring it down over here, bring the volume down right here, or if you already have it in a pattern, bring the velocity down, because this will definitely take the volume down for every cymbal sound that's in the song. Alright, so that's the hi-hats and stuff. With rim shots, the rim is basically that outside part of a snare. Like when you look at a snare, you hit the snare, and then sometimes they hit the edge of the snare. That's the rim. Alright, so with this, sometimes I'll EQ it along with the hi-hats, or sometimes I'll EQ it with the snares and the claps. Depends on what I'm going for. But if you want to go for it by itself, go to the EQ. We're gonna cut it. We're gonna look at the sound on the EQ. We're gonna look at the waves and see where it's most sensitive. Sometimes if you're not seeing where it's most sensitive, you just play around with it in the sensitive area. And I mainly like to go here. That's for the rim shot. Like I said, it can be either or. Cymbals, I mean with the hi-hats or with the snares, but just for its own, you look at the sound waves in its own insert. With piano is a bit more complex than just the regular grayed out instruments, because the piano is a plugin. So with a plugin, it's going to have its own stuff. So this is the default plugin setup. What I do is I'll go up to presets, I'll go over all the way to compressed. And I like that because it is a more tighter sound. Like when I'm doing piano work, I like to have it as clear as possible without no crazy sounds, no harshness, no nothing. And with the harshness, we go to this hardness knob. We're gonna put it all the way up. See how it sounds? I'm not sure if you hear it, but you can probably hear it's kind of like somebody not banging but pressing hard on the key if they were really sitting at a piano. I'm going to bring it down a little bit. It lessens up. We're going to bring it down. Now it's a little bit softer. Well, that's a lot softer actually. This is where I like to go. That's a nice sound to it. So we are at insert 6 that has its own its own insert on the mixer board. So we're gonna go to EQ. We're gonna cut it. Styx cut. And I'm not gonna get into all of these settings on the keys because they're not really needed. That's why I always go to compressed, because it's always set up in a way where I don't have to use anything else except for hardness. So for now we're gonna do that. Like I said, you can branch out, but once you feel comfortable with this, just feel comfortable. You want to feel comfortable before you start really taking in too much. So with this, the keys, we don't want to go to his bass. We don't want to move here. We could do this, but that's a little close to the cut. What I'll do is I'll go around this area. And pianos don't really have a number on the scale either. So I'll look at the sound waves on the EQ and play around with it. Make sure you cut it. Make sure you bring down the bandwidth. And this depends on the song you're going for. It can be down here in this area. It can be up here. I've done both. It depends on the song. So just, just make sure it's cut and play around in this area. You can play around in this area, but make sure it's not interfering with like 808s and stuff like that. And if it is interfering with 808s, you gotta really blend them in and balance it out pretty good. That's the keys. With the Boo Bass, which is another plugin. Where is it? In miscellaneous is right here. I like to use this for like guitar bass and stuff like that when I'm not using 808s. Like that. That's how it sounds as a default sound. Sometimes I do play with these knobs right here. This is the bass. So we're gonna look at these knobs as the EQ scale, basically. So bass in this area, mid this area, treble this area. So you can go ahead, you can play with this, because it is the same as this, but for knowledge purpose, you will still have to cut, or not have to, but it's still good to cut, which we would do like that. And a lot of times I will boost just as I do my 808, which is boosting like that. This is towards the boost route. Turning it back turns off the bass, turning it forward turns up the bass. Treble, now since this is a guitar, you can play around with it. Now, one thing that you gotta be wary of is if you do this, if you mess with these knobs, you might not want to do both the knobs over on the plugin and then mess with EQ. That might interfere with a lot of things, because right now I turned up the bass here and I also turned up the bass here, so it's double bass on it. And there's also double cut. So either or you can mix. So I have my cut in my EQ. I'm gonna turn up my bass in the plugin, but I'm not gonna touch my bass here. I might turn up my treble here, but I'm not gonna touch it here. Right? Just be wary of that. Either or is fine. Just make sure you don't interfere with the sounds in it. And also, you can EQ it the same as an 808. Like for instance, if I make a song, which I have done, I've made a song with both 808s and a Boo Bass in, and I wanted them to have the same EQ over here. So I would do that, and when I do that, I try not to have them playing at the same time. So what I may do is I might have the 808 playing in the hook, and then once the hook ends, I'll cut out the 808s and then bring in my Boo Bass. which will have a more softer feel, and it won't, be boosted like the 808. I mean, well, they'll be both, if they're both at one, they'll be boosted the same way. But the 808s, they're a little bit more drummier. If I don't need that in a verse section, I'll bring that in. I'll bring the boo bass in. All right, that's boo bass. Wind instruments. Let's see. Wind instruments. I believe you know about citrus. Let's see where that is. Citrus. Right here. Wind. So this is what I like to use. I like to use a lot of wind instruments in here. I pretty much go for, if I'm going for a flute, I'll go for FM flute. Or if I'm going for more of a saxophone feel, I'll go for synthesish bassoon. And that's what it sounds like when you play it by default. This is pretty much an EQ right here. But for learning purposes, we're going to go back to the mixer board. I'm going to cut. Where is it? Crap. And we're going to see where I am. Now, the air instruments are on the frequency scale, and they are at 10 to 15 kilohertz, which is at the top. That's shimmer, air, and brightness. So that's about in this area. And we play a note though. When we play a note, we see that the notes reflect in different areas of the EQ. So if I go down here, it's going to play in this area. As I move up, it's going to be in this area. And this is because this instrument is wind, but it does have sort of a bassy. That's why it must be called bassoon. So even at this area, we can boost this presence in the presence area, which is 5 kilohertz. That is not the presence area. This is the presence area. And even though it's not the most sensitive in this area, it does bring out the presence of the wind aspect of the instrument. Alright, that's how I would do that instrument, along with the flute. But I definitely made the flute in a different insert because I do EQ them differently. Let's go to cut. So the default flute, and this time I didn't use FM flute. I'm not sure why. That's how it sounds. By default, that's how it sounds when it is cut, when the mud is cut. And we will cut. We will boost in this area maybe. Depends on you too. With flutes, let's see. See, with certain instruments, it's not really necessary to bring up in this area. It's not really necessary because they don't even reach it. Because it does say shimmer, air, and brightness. Now I have literally brought wind sounds into a mix and then boosted it in that area. just to bring out the actual real feeling of wind. Um, so I would do that. It makes sense. But that would be a good boost area for the flute. Even though it's sensitive here, it is towards the low end. Alright. So that's the flute. And mind you, this is a preference thing, but it is also a basic, like basically testing your ear. Like when you hear a flute, you don't want to hear a bunch of spit coming out of it. You want to hear it be clear. So for me, that area it sounded clear. That was the most. That was I'm not gonna say it was the most clear I can get it, but that was clear for a flute. This sound right here, I love making video game music, and this is a good sound for it. It's not necessarily on the frequency scale, so this is how I would mix it. Oh boy. Go to the EQ, cut. See what it sounds like, see where the sounds are coming from. I like that. And that's pretty much it. I do play around with a lot of this stuff, but for learning purposes, we're gonna say do EQ first and then play around with these. Now with stuff like this is pretty, I'm not gonna say it's complex, but it's past the basics. So what I'll do is I want mine to sound literally like a saxophone. To me, it has the saxophone qualities, but it doesn't sound exactly like a saxophone. And we're not trying to get it exactly like a saxophone because it's not. But what I might do is bring it over this area. And this is basically like stretching out, or not stretching, but rather like, I would say smoothing out how it sounds. I would normally put it here. Sometimes I will play with these depending on how it sounds in the EQ. And if it doesn't sound too clear, then I might bring this up, because mind you, this one, the low end frequency, mid frequency, high end frequency, right? And what those are, once again, low end, mid end, or low mids, mid and low mid and mid, and the highs. Alright, that is EQ, so to speak.